is mental health. And it's mental health that affects youngsters, young people. Now, I have someone here who is very, 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 very smart and young. How old are you?
I'm 23.
She's 23. Good Lord, she's a baby. But she's a very smart baby. Tap on your thing and let me see. Yes.
Yay.
So you speak directly in. Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So always speak directly into it. If there's somebody out there who can't hear what my guest is saying, let me know. And I know that they will let me know. Now, the topic we're talking about today is mental health. My guest is called Huda. Now, Huda Elmi.
Huda Elmi.
Yes. Huda is a very smart, young, fine thing. She is originally, you're not really from Somalia, but your ancestors are.
My parents are,
Your
and
parents
I am.
are.
It curses through my blood. It is.
Somalia curses through her blood.
Yes.
She's a very proud Somalian. I like young girls, 23. And she comes from her special patch of Africa. Africa girls rule. Yeah! We rule. Anyway, okay. So we're going to talk about now, we're talking about, in fact, one thing I need to let you know is she is my best friend and colleague.
Yes. Yes.
And she's currently running to be on the Labour Party National Executive. So please use your vote this summer for her. We're going to kind of talk about her on this show a lot. She's going to come intermittently, aren't you?
Yes.
So when it's time, if you're a Labour Party member and you want to vote for her, or you want to say something, you want to back her, or you want to join me in the screaming for African chick, man. So we're going to do that. First of all, our topic is an impairment. That mental health is an impairment that may be cognitive, developmental, intellectual, mental, physical, sensory. Sensory means, limbs, movement, and all of that, or some combination of all of these. So you may have some young person who is not thinking straight, has all sorts of thoughts that are not what you would term normal. They have developmental issues, which means that they may be 16 but think like a 4-year-old. That's also intellectual, so they may need help to go to the loo and all of that. That's developmental. Intellectual means thinking, cognitive. Mental may be having few episodes of schizophrenia, which we could talk about. Physical means they can't really move about like you. Sensory is sort of the same thing, or a combination of all. It substantially affects a person's life's activities and may be present from birth or occur during a person's lifetime. Now, I have a little niece who, she was fine. She goes to the dentist at the age of, I think, 4 or 5. But, she'd done all her developmental marks and everything was fine. She goes to the dentist. They do something there which we're still in court over, and it all went very wrong. And she's in a wheelchair. She cannot talk properly. She does communicate. She's a very smart intellectual, because if she wasn't, it would be a different thing. But she's still smart and she's still getting on with things, and we love her very much. But this is a situation now. I know that in everyone's home, extended families, these things happen all the time. Today, Huda is here to help me navigate the choppy waters of mental disability, episodes of schizophrenia in the family and its implications to individuals within the family and its social implications within our communities. There is a stigma and an embarrassment which has not changed at all. People feel they have to hide the fact that they have a son or a sibling who has an impairment or a mental disability. How do we address it or bring it to the fore out in the open? So we can share views and probably find out with you, the viewers, the listeners, how to go about it. We can get help. Maybe there's help somewhere. Maybe there's a suggestion someone knows that you don't know. The number to call is, the studio lines are open. I'll be talking to Huda, interviewing her. She's going to give us all sorts of interesting and eye-opening information. If you want to call in, the number to call is 0203 735 8820 or 0203 286 0185. So, Huda, where do we start? Where do I start asking you questions? I don't know. I mean, first of all, you can tell me about your cousin who, how you found out that. How did you realize that there was something not quite right?
I think starting as well, I think, kudos to you and for everybody else actually talking about mental health, particularly in the black community, because it affects black men 17 times more likely than their white counterparts.
Gosh, 17
times. It's debilitating. It's completely and utterly debilitating in our community. But I think in terms of my cousin, I think the first sort of signs were that he became incredibly withdrawn. He wasn't taking part in as many things. And I think kind of leading on to what you were mentioning about the stigma attached to it. He couldn't come out as early as perhaps he should have.
At what age do you think that was? Because sometimes you are too young to actually realize it.
Exactly, especially if you're going through puberty, especially if you're going through your teenage years. And I think that particularly in his circumstances, he was about 13 or 14 when he first started changing, I'd say. And I think it sort of escalated. And I think that escalation took place essentially because of the fact that he felt like he couldn't ask for help. And I think that talking and navigating, as you were saying, ideas of mental health and why it is particularly an issue in our community, I think we have to look at why it's so stigmatized and what it is about, culturally speaking, not just in Africa, not just the African diaspora, but particularly when we're talking about people, black people here in Britain. There's this idea that mental health is a weakness.
It is.
A kind of weakness.
I remember, I'm not cutting you up,
No, of course not.
but I remember somebody saying that a man, and he was really upset about something, and he was trying to tell his friends that, oh, I'm so unhappy, and this, this whole situation is affecting me very badly, and and someone just shut him up and said, oh, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
You're a black, strong man. Black men don't do, this is a white man's thing. The word depression is wrong. It doesn't happen to black people.
And that is the issue. That's the issue. Why are we not saying that strength is being able to communicate your emotions effectively? Why are we saying that strength is not being vulnerable? That is strength. Someone standing in their own truth and saying, I'm not okay. I was really sad last night. I felt like I couldn't get out of bed this morning. That's powerful. And that is somebody who is willing to take their own well-being seriously enough to reach for help and to reach for people around you. I wish my cousin had done that. Because by the time we realised, he was being sectioned. By the time we realised that something was wrong, it had escalated to such a point of no return.
What is section?
So sectioning is when the person's rights are taken away from them. So it usually involves the police. And I think I want to get into that as well, because I think that particularly when we talk about racism within the healthcare or just institutionally speaking, this is something that disproportionately affects black men again, because it's not a first port of call. Sectioning is the last thing that you should do if somebody is having a crisis. Because sectioning is saying that this person is not capacitated enough to think for themselves, be able to make decisions for themselves, and they need to be removed and placed somewhere where they are completely, utterly unable to hurt themselves and anybody else.
Okay, let me help you here. Now, viewers and listeners, I want you to imagine that you have a son, say, because mostly this is 17 times more happening to young black boys all over, from all over Africa, and it's happening here in this country. So you imagine that there is a son in your house, a nephew, a cousin, a brother, whatever, and he is withdrawn, he is silent, he's upset. And as time has gone on, you have thought that maybe he was having a little bit of a stroke. And then you thought, oh, come on, snap out of it. And he's not snapping out of it. And then one day he gets upset and he starts throwing things around. And you try and stop him, and accidentally, because he's flailing his hands around, he hits your mother. Your mother decides to call the hospital. She's calling the GP. GP says call the hospital. Hospital says, oh, we'll get someone, they get the ambulance, and the ambulance arrives, but it arrives with 6 or 7 policemen, 2 police women, and the ambulance crew. They come into your house, they grab hold of him, they pin him down. Now, he was having an episode, but when he sees the policemen and the ambulance men and all of these other intruders, he becomes agitated. Now he's looking at his mother, he's screaming, he's saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, you hurt, I didn't mean to hurt you. He suddenly feels fright. The police don't care. They drag him roughly. They hold him up. Sometimes they even handcuff you because they think you are a danger to your family, a danger to society, and to the old lady down the road. None of these people are around, by the way, but hey. So then they take you forcibly. Now, this is a child who has had all sorts of problems. He has been withdrawn. He doesn't know how to articulate himself. He doesn't know how to say, I'm just sad and I don't know what to do. Anyway, they drag him into the ambulance. They give him an injection sometimes. I mean, I don't know about... They do? Okay. So they give him an injection and they take him to one of the holding facilities. That is to be sectioned. When they take him there, it is an unknown. He's never been there before. He doesn't know the people. The people are brusque and abrupt. His mother is there. She's powerless. He can see from his eyes. He looks into her eyes how powerless she is. He doesn't want to be there. These people are alien to him. Imagine it. Now, you, the parent, are going to feel guilt because this is not what you intended when you called these people. This is your baby and he has a problem. However, they've taken it out of your hands. Your child is now totally out of your hands. That is to be sectioned. Now, when a child is sectioned, and let me tell you that a 13-year-old is still a child. A 16-year-old is still a child. Somebody with mental issues, mental problems, that has not manifested itself properly, but is on its way, is still a child. If this treatment is done once, twice, 3 times, you have lost your child. Because he has lost trust in you. He hates all his life that is around him. Bad things are manifesting themselves at him. What does one do?
So in terms of how it happened with my cousin, it actually was incredibly, what you said was incredibly right. But in terms of the specific case of my cousin, he was threatening to kill himself.
Oh, I see.
He had taken a knife into his room, he'd locked the door. What can you do but call the police at that moment?
Yes.
You have no choice. You can't get in. You don't know what he's doing. And imagine, this is a shock. He'd never spoken about this before in his life. His parents had no idea where this was coming from because he'd never said, Mum, Dad, I feel really sad. Mum, Dad, I'm hearing voices. Mum, Dad, something really terrible is going on in my... This was a complete shock.
to the parents.
To the parents, because they'd never had that conversation before in their lives. Yes. And then all of a sudden to see somebody wailing and taking a knife and locking themselves in their room, what are you supposed to do but call the police? And how are you to expect that the treatment that he would receive would be so vicious? And you talked about the holding cell in the police station. I think that's a very, very interesting point, because when you're sectioned, you're supposed to go to a hospital, but there are no hospital beds.
Speaking to the camera.
There are no hospital beds because the NHS is in a crisis.
Also, they took him to the holding
cell. They do that a lot because there are no spare beds, and if there are no spare beds, this person is a danger to themselves. They need to be isolated. You do get access to medical professionals, but for that time being, you are put as if you are a prisoner, as if you are a criminal. Yes. In a police station. It's not meant to happen. It's not meant to happen, but that's the thing. When everything is so under-resourced, what can they do? And I think that's the bigger question. I think that, of course, you have the societal aspect of stigma, and of course you have what's going on in our own communities, which we can actively change. Everybody who's listening to this can actively make a difference in saying that I'm going to destigmatize mental health. I'm not going to see it as a weakness, and I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak completely and utterly, freely with whoever I must, tell them my own vulnerabilities in a way to coax out of others their own. But more importantly, if we're talking about the political and the context in which this is happening, I think we have to appreciate that the NHS, which is responsible not just for mental health, but all kinds and forms of disability and illness, is struggling. It doesn't exist anymore. And when we look at mental health cases, it makes up 28% of the overall cases that hospitals see across the UK. But it only receives 13% of the annual budget. So what does that say about the government's commitment to tackling mental health? Beyond that as well, if we look at social care, which when people say social care, they think of elderly people and they think of care homes, but it's much more important than that. It's about consistent care. So if you are somebody with mental health, you need consistent care in your life. You need to have consistent updates. You need to have outpatient support as well as inpatient support. Now that, in and of itself, has also seen across the last 8 years a 13% cut. So again, what does that say about the government's commitment to mental health? It says there is no commitment. But I think beyond that as well, this is a conservative issue. And I want to make this political. Not just because I'm political, but this is a conservative issue.
No, you have to make... You see, people say, and I'll say this to you as well, that people always say, oh, I don't talk politics. Look,
everything is
political. Buying a loaf of bread
is political. It's political.
The cost of it is
the cost
political.
of life.
The
breathing.
cost of life.
Breathing
after your children is a political act.
Exactly.
Because the people who are making the nursery places, who are creating, you have to go to work 9 to 5,
exactly.
And yet nursery places are from 9:30 or 8:30 till 3:30. What happens in that little time in between?
And
this is politics.
Exactly. And there's no community support, there's no centres, there's no free creches, your workplaces don't necessarily have creches anymore.
Yes.
And I think that what the Conservative government has done, particularly with the NHS, but this is something that they do, across the board, is they cut the spending, and then privatise. I mean, they've given aspects of our NHS to Virgin the train company, Virgin the planes. They've given aspects to it already, behind closed doors, because they don't want to cause a fuss.
Well, they've done the same with education.
Exactly.
They've given some of it
away
to McDonald's.
Exactly. They've given it away because, for them, privatising and siphoning off public good is to their benefit. Because, number one, it fills the pocket of their best friend.
Indeed,
but
business.
Secondly, also, what it does is it limits responsibility.
Indeed.
So when we talk about the NHS and what's happened, particularly over the last 8 successive years of Conservative rule, we have to talk about the fact that when we look at the deficit that we're seeing, I mean, recently, actually, it was a massive scandal because it came out that the NHS was £960 million in debt, which they tried to say, oh, it's only double what we expected. It shouldn't be a penny in debt because it is something that all of us need. It is something all of us use, but it is £960 million in debt. So tell me, how are they going to prioritise mental health, which is an invisible illness? Which isn't an illness that affects absolutely everybody, and isn't also an illness which is debilitating. It is to some, But for majority of people, and you talked about it earlier, it can be cognitive, it can be etc, etc, etc. But for the majority of people suffering from mental health, they're ordinary people. They live ordinary lives.
Oh, yes.
It manifests itself in anxiety, in stress, in other sort of disorders that aren't necessarily a crisis. It is just your day-to-day life.
Now, it is said that from the ages of 16 to 23, young people feel serious anxiety. They feel serious stress. Now, 16, it is from exam time, from all of the... I don't know if I'm getting a caller. Hold on, let's see. Hello, caller? It's from exam time, it's from university time, it's from... you wanted to add something?
No, I just wanted to add, because you talk about, and I think this is very important as to why we're talking about young people. Let's talk about the condition of young people in Britain today.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about the fact, like you said, schooling is becoming more and more difficult because it's no longer tailored to actual development, educational development. It's not about, let's make you the most well-rounded human being. It's all about, can you reach these incredibly, targets? Can you reach these targets? They don't mean anything to every student because some students are going to go and become plumbers. Oh, but you can't become a plumber because there's no more FE. Oh, some students are geared towards becoming nurses. Oh, but it's no longer vocational. You must go to university, therefore you must get these grades.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if everything about you, your entire sensibility means that you are somebody who is catered and was born to be a nurse. Now you must get an A star in this and an A in that. It's no longer about what your potential is. It's about hitting these incredibly arbitrary targets. But beyond that as well, say that you drop out of education. Say you no longer want to be a part of this target-driven madness, right?
Yeah.
Then what do you become into?
You drop through the cracks.
Exactly, because you try and get a job. It's 0 hours. You might work a full week 1 week. You might work no hours the next. So again, what does that mean for you in terms of building a life for yourself, building a livelihood? You can't. I mean, look at what's happening. McDonald's strike is majority young people. They're all going on strike. TGI's, which is another chain, fast food chain, who predominantly exploit young workers because they know that they are desperate. They're all going on strike. They're doing this because young people don't get opportunities anymore. Young people are not able to enter employment that is stable anymore. Young people can't continue with an education system that's failing them anymore. So what are you supposed to do? Bar sit at home. What are you supposed to do?
This is a 23-year-old girl who is saying this. Listen well. We are having serious problems. Mental health begins with anxiety, confusion, isolation, stress.
And this is the thing, it's like, there are some mental health disorders that you are born with. There are some that you are born with.
Yes.
But what we're seeing flaring up and increasing is what you say. It is those that you are put more in risk in, considering your social condition. And this is a very interesting fact, because I think that young black children are more at risk, and this is lots and lots of studies that have said this, are at greater risk of developing mental health disorders because of the fact that they face structural oppression in a multitude of ways. So this is economically, if you grow up in poverty, you're more likely to get it. Exactly. And stay in poverty, but also more likely to be at risk of a mental health disorder. If you're black, because racism is a psychological trauma that has affected generations of our people, right? So you are more likely to be at risk in that sense. You're also more likely to be at risk if, you go through some kind of stress or some kind of, like you said, confused, like all these various social conditional factors, right?
You are undervalued.
Exactly, all these things. So tell me, if every single young black child in Britain is at greater risk of developing mental health disorders, what are we doing about it? What is our government doing about it? What is we as a community doing about it?
I'll tell you something else. Today, my cousin was on a train from Tunbridge to Tunbridge Wells. On the train, she and her friend, and they were attacked verbally by a woman. She called them niggers. She said for them to go back to their country. Now, my cousin is mixed race, and even she is being targeted, abused. The woman stood in front of her, ready for a fight. Luckily, my cousin did not react, But it was terrible when we all heard it. Now, people have been, my friend Edith and I were walking.
Lovely Edith.
Yes, lovely Edith and I were walking along the road from the office, heading towards the Brunswick Centre, and an old lady with a stick and pulling, you know, those shopping trolley things with wheels.
Yeah.
She stopped her shopping trolley to call us black bitches, go back to Africa, and you do know what? I mean, this has happened so many times that we just burst out laughing. We just burst out laughing. Now, if you get that, you get vile, underhand racism all the time. You get it in work, you get it in the shops.
But what does that do to you? Like, this is the thing. What does that do to your psyche?
This is
It is incredible. It is incredible the effect that has, particularly on children. And like you said, it doesn't, you know, yes, there's of course calling you the N-word on the street and calling you black bitches. Of course, that's the overt. When we talk about the covert
is
at
even
school,
more, yeah.
And
the teachers. And you find out that teachers, really, you cannot even trust the teachers. I put my children through the independent sector.
Really?
But yes, I thought that was safer for me. Because, you see, they can be rude to your face, and then I'll face them because I'm paying for it.
Of course.
However, you know, in the general sector, in the public sector, you just don't know who is teaching your child.
And the thing is that in terms of my earliest recollections of institutional racism as a child in school, it would be very simple things from, oh, we don't expect you to get this.
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. This is, you know, you're at a different level, you know? And I think it starts off like that. And then it grows, and it grows, and it grows. And it takes a certain amount of pressure before you as a child start feeling, oh, maybe I'm not capable. Maybe I'm not going to get these grades. And I was very, very lucky to be born to very, very strong refugee African parents who told me, you better get that grade. Don't come home if you don't get that grade. And if I didn't have that consistent reassurance that I was amazing, that I was capable, that I was more than effective at education, I don't know if I could have sat there and gotten through these teachers undermining me, even to the point where when it came to my target grades, they were significantly lower than what I was performing at. Not because they thought that I was dumb, but because they didn't want the risk of me giving me high target grades, me not reaching them, and then lowering their overall grade. They didn't want that risk.
I know, we've been through it all. We have been through it all. And you just don't know where it begins and where it ends. It doesn't end. It is incontinuable. Now, if you have, there are different types of children. I should play... Huda made a request for some music which I haven't played yet because we're getting carried away. We've only got an hour and there's
this
so
has
much
gone
to
so
talk
quickly.
about. Yes. However, I will play now.
Yes. Can I give a little introduction to it?
I'll play a little bit, yeah.
Yes, so this is Maka Shamiyat Unjiri, which is a incredibly popular Somali song. If there are any Somalis listening to this is played at every single wedding. This is about... Are they hearing this?
Did you hear that, people? There's something going on with the music, but I'm still playing it though. I am determined. No. Side. Up here. It will be okay on the radio.
Are you sure? That's better. That's better. Go all the way down. Do that again. Put that lever down.
There. What's the meaning of the song that we've just played?
So the meaning of the song is titled Makashami Yatunjini, which translates to when I was 15 years old. And it's talking about how at 15 he ran into a woman so beautiful that she convinced him within his heart to finally consider love and marriage. So it's about the fact that he grew up and he finally became a man at 15 because of love at 15. And it's a song that is both bouncy. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and it essentially talks about what all Somali songs talk about. There's a particular genre called ja'el, and ja'el means love.
Okay.
Almost all Somali songs fall into that category. Only recently has there been growth of different categories, but traditionally speaking, all Somali songs are about ja'el.
Well, we shall be playing more Somali songs for
I look forward to it.
Yes, we love Somali songs. You will not know, but we have a Somali connection.
Hey.
We don't tell people.
We don't tell. But I want to get more political because I see that not enough time is left. But I want to get more political.
I must add quickly that when I was doing, because you wanted to talk about this subject, and also because I wanted it to come out. And when I was doing the research on it, and I read about how people are sectioned, and I read about how young children are sectioned, and I read about how sometimes they needn't section them that way.
Oh, no. Of course. Yeah.
And also, a friend of mine sent me a message when I put this advert out on Facebook that her daughter was sectioned and it was wrong diagnosis.
Yes. But this is the thing, and this again talks about racism in the healthcare industry, right? Black men are disproportionate. If you look at the statistics, so whenever they release the statistics of people that have been sectioned, black men disproportionately are sectioned, and this is because because black men are seen as aggressive. So and I want to use the example of what happened in Lewisham. I don't know if your listeners are aware of this, but there was a black man having a mental health crisis on the streets of Lewisham a couple of months ago. And the police restrained him so hard that he ended up choking to death. And now it's an inquiry. So I think that when we talk about racism, we talk about particularly what racism has done to our black men.
Oh, yes.
It has emasculated them in some sense, but in another sense it has demonized them and criminalized them to an extent that when they are having a mental health crisis, they are seen as a threat. When instead, they should be given a hospital appointment. When instead, they should be given therapy. They should be given behavioral and cognitive therapy. Instead of all of that, they skip all of these steps that they would give to their white counterparts. They skip all of it and go straight to section because he is a danger. Who knows what this black man can do on the streets of Left of his own accord? And I think that plays out.
This is your point. The point that you're making, which is very important, is that it seems like up till now, I don't know if it's because of the sins of their fathers, that white people are scared constantly.
I think
of a black man walking down the street.
I think that they are conditioned. And I think that they are conditioned to be scared because of perceptions that exist about black people. And I think that if we look to our history all the way back to slavery, the only way that they can enslave our people, our strong African men and women, the only way that they can enslave them was to perpetuate an idea that they are inferior. But now, they are not in a continent far away. They're our neighbours. So I think now what you have is an idea, so that the inferiority kind of narrative that was spun is switched, it's changed to now the angry, the aggressive, the aggressor, the foreigner, the person you don't understand, the person who's completely alien to you. And what you don't understand, you fear. And what you fear, you end up being incredibly oppressive towards. And I think that that is the cycle. I don't necessarily think that it is... I mean, of course, there are individuals within all of this that perpetuate it. If we look at the far right, if we look at Tommy Robinson, and I know that there's going to be a protest this Saturday outside Downing Street, hashtag Free Tommy Robinson, which just goes to show how mainstream this white nationalist and racist rhetoric has gotten. But I think that beyond that as well, and the scary thing, is that the ordinary person has got a lot of this pervasive racist rhetoric embedded within them and imbued within them, and it's essentially the entire institutions are complicit in it, because they don't spin any different. In education, they spin to you that the black boy is an underachiever who becomes a gangbanger. You know, when you go to work, it is, you know, the black man is again emasculated in the sense that he's not the boss, and the black woman. Yes. And I think that in all of these spaces and in all of these various different forms of life that we know to be British life, the black person is never viewed in a positive light. And if you're not viewed in a positive light, then how can you be something that's cherished, and how can you be something that people see as a positive aspect?
Because it looks like constantly you are fighting against something which is so covert that it is not there, and yet it's there.
Of course, and that's the difference between American and British racism. Yes. In America, they'll literally tell you, I'm not hiring you because you're an N-word. But in Britain, everything is this polite culture that we have, but also the kind of racism in which, why does the white person need to attack you on the street when they can just make sure that you never advance in life?
Oh, yes.
When they can just make sure that poverty, consumes every aspect of you, that you will never ever become anything, you're not worth anything, and you will never become worth anything. So why do we need to punish you beyond that? And I think that's British society, and that's what we exist in, and this is how mental health plays into it. Because you become so demoralised, so disillusioned, so disenfranchised. And this is why, and I know that we don't have much time, but this is why I think the Labour Party is something that if you're not a member, you know, I'm not here to propagandise, but I am going to say that the mental health is a particular area of policy that the Labour Party is doing an incredible aspect on. And I think that when we look at the cuts that are happening, not just to the NHS, but to the entire public sector, you know, it was John McDonnell who quite famously said a year or so ago that this austerity program, which is cut, then privatise, it is a choice. It is not political or economic necessity, and that we can make a change. And I think that even as you said, everything is political, so therefore politicise yourself and educate yourself on what is going on in terms of what your own public services in your own area are going through, and do something about it. And you can do something about it, not just at the ballot box, but campaign, become active. Tell your family, tell your friends.
Get to your community, where you live, where, you know, and this is something I say all the time, that if you help one person, if you feel strongly about something, and you talk to one person, or you help, or say, let us do one person, you are about to change the world. People do not realize how important it is that we can't continually... That's another thing which I keep saying to people. You cannot continually sit there and complain and say, oh, woe is me, these people are treating me badly, these people are... Once in a while, you have to raise your voice.
Now, did we throw the shackles of colonialism and slavery by sitting there and saying that, oh, you know, woe is me? No, you had to become an active agent for change. People rioted. People took part in a revolution. People said, no more will I have this oppressive structure.
This is it. And also, I was watching, you know, every time I see the fight for women to vote, and you see Emmeline Pankhurst and her crew continually being thrown into prison, continually being done in, until... Here we are.
Exactly. But I will say that in terms of, when it comes to the suffrage movement, that they had particular figures within it, particularly Pankhurst. I mean, it's not like they were that great when it comes to race issues.
No,
but in terms of what they did for women, what they did for white women.
They did for white women.
Yeah,
but they did it for
They did it for
white
women.
women.
And I think that, I'm not sitting here and denigrating what they did. What they did was incredibly important. But I think that, particularly as the black community, we should
need
push.
To do our
we
own.
need to do it ourselves, but we also need to push
Our
that
problem-
our own people have done it before, and our own people will continue to do it again. And I don't think we need to rely on these figures, which are important still, you know, when it comes, because we're an aspect and we are involved and we are as much a part of British society as anyone else, and therefore we should be talking about the suffrage movement. But beyond that as well, we should be mentioning, you know, black female revolutionaries who committed and were completely and utterly active and engaged in the suffrage movement back home.
Indeed.
I think there needs to be a balance, because we consistently talk about Emily Pankhurst, we talk about, you know,
We
all these.
talk about them because they're here.
They're
and
here.
We're here.
But there were people here who was just
Of
as
course.
amazing.
I mean,
But
they,
no one
they,
talks
they,
about
try,
them, and
they
that's
don't
a
talk
problem.
about them, but we are
But
going
we
to
will.
talk about
We
them.
will.
Yes, you and I are going to
Exactly.
have a whole
The
program
history will
about
live
that.
through them.
Yes, we need to do that. And, you know, we need for our fellow black people, while we're talking about disability and mental health, to realize that the mental health of your child is linked to a lot of things that are happening around your child. It's linked to things that are happening in your child's school. It's linked to things that happen. You need to ask questions all the time. You need to, when you go to the school, to speak to the teachers. You need to speak to the doctors. One thing someone said on this show last week was, when people go to hospital and they're given a drug, they don't ask what it's going to do for them. They just take it. Now, we need to start becoming inquisitive. We need to do our own research.
Particularly when it comes to mental health, because
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, when it comes to my cousin, he's given a cocktail of drugs, and the entire point is what works, what doesn't work, and then there's meetings every 2 or 3 months. It should be more regular, but of course it isn't because of the
NHS
lack of
cuts,
But and basically the question is, did that work for you? What would you prefer? Should we lessen this dosage? Should we increase that dosage? But that's how we should be thinking about things. It's not just take blindly and then see what happens. You have to question, is this working for me? Is this doing what I want to do? Can I live my best life through this? Because particularly when it comes to mental health and the treatments that you receive, it should be tailored to your own personality, and it should be tailored to what works best for you in a given context. It shouldn't be this one-size-fits-all kind of medical way in which I think a lot of people want to turn our entire healthcare system into, because it's a lot cheaper if everybody fits the same mold.
Indeed.
But you're right, you should be inquisitive, you should continue to question what it is that is this working for me?
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, just speak. And I think that's the thing, it's giving and empowering people to talk about their own mental health, but as importantly, is it that we need to convince people to listen.
We need to convince people to listen. We need to get involved in our own issues, and we need to help each other. There is another issue where somebody was saying to me yesterday that what she noticed with her son's mental health issues were, when she went to the hospital and was trying to talk to the black, whoever was in charge or something, if it was a black person, they were maybe out of embarrassment, or maybe they didn't want to look like they were helping you or something, they were not forthcoming. And yet when they spoke to the other people, they were very forthcoming, and it was this Indian doctor who was much more helpful than the same black person. Now, if there's anybody out there, please help your people. We're not saying it's not special. There is an NHS. Everyone is supposed to be looked after. What is wrong? If you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, you are supposed to be helping somebody who needs you. Don't be embarrassed, and don't be difficult. You've got to help your own people. They help themselves all the time. So what about us? Now, there is another thing which I needed to, you to talk about, which was when, people are not well, they are powerless themselves, and they need understanding. And when a parent is not very literate as well, that is also a problem, because they cannot communicate with the health services, etc., which holds back the patient. Now, are there people there who are willing to help people in our community who cannot speak the language properly?
That's, I think, where we need to pull together, because, where there are people who may struggle in terms of language, there are also people, who within our own community are able to translate. You know, and I think that, you know, there are lots and lots of people who were able to, particularly, you know, when I was growing up, it was just expected of me that I was a translator. Because I could, no, it was, and I think that's how we need to think of things. It's, you can speak both languages, therefore you must help your community, and you must help people in your community, and you must continue to push everything that you can in order to ensure that people in your community have an access and ability to all these various different services, which they might need. And I think that language is a barrier, and I think that where councils have no more money, because of budget cuts, so they can't provide you with a translator. Yeah. So you know, as a community, we need to pull together, and I think that that's what we're losing. We're losing our sense of community. I think our community is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and before you know it, it's just you, your man, and your children. And that's not the way in which we can handle things, and it's not a way in which we were brought up to handle things.
No.
And I think we can't allow that to happen in our communities, because I think it will be a complete and utter destruction of what we know in terms of
it
of
will be
community.
a breakdown of our communities, and also a breakdown on us ourselves if we cannot help ourselves. There are a lot of issues that we cannot talk about in an hour, because this is a big topic. We are going to in 2 weeks' time, we're going to talk about adult mental health. And we've had the case of, we just heard about Kate Spade, who makes beautiful handbags, and she is a big designer in New York, and she is alleged to have committed suicide, and she was having mental problems because her family was unraveling and breaking down in front of her. She couldn't cope with it. This is anxiety, this is stress. People think that when people are rich, they do not have issues and they're sorted. It's not. When you can be poor, but when you're surrounded with love and understanding, you have a better chance of surviving this miserable world than if you have a lot of money. So we need to rethink the whole strategy. We need to talk to each other. We need to feel compassion for each other. And I'm going to talk about that. I think I'll be by then I'll be doing 2 hours, and we can talk a little bit more. You can come on. I'll get an adult as well, and then we can talk mental health and where we go from here. At this moment, I want everyone who's listening, all listeners, to know that the mental health of your children is the most important thing. That our children are our future, and if we do not look after them well, and if we do not pay attention to some of their issues and their illnesses, and we are going to create a very backward black nation within Britain that is going to be sucked into a void. Now, if you imagine that, and if you do not want that, think again. Think carefully where you want to go from here. Now, remember that when you have children, it is your responsibility to leave them on this earth grounded, so that they too will do the same for theirs. This earth is not for us, it is for your children, and your children will look after it for their children. Please be vigilant. Bye bye. Be well. I'll carry on with your music.